Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. We got three guys today. It's me, my good buddies Neil Polachek and Greg Sterling. John Gerard's
How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing great. Had a great week and looking forward to unpacking a bunch of interesting things that happened this week in the world of AI. Delta Airlines plans to use AI in ticket pricing, which draws fire from U.S. lawmakers, raises a bunch of eyebrows from consumers to say, how does dynamic ticket pricing that's personalized for me using AI going to help me as a customer? So we'll dig into that a little bit. We'll dig into therapy sessions with AI. Who's doing it? What's their experience? Therapy with AI is a big trend these days. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This quarter, Alphabet, Google's parent company, reminded us that Alphabet is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world on the internet. And we'll talk a little bit about their growth and what's driving their growth. And then the last story for today is AI advisor Alexander Braun argues that companies winning in today's AI landscape aren't necessarily building the best products. They're just building a wrapper around existing LLMs or just claiming territory. So we'll talk a little bit about all those things. Let's lead off with Delta. Greg, what's going on with Delta? What's the story this week?
Well, so Delta announced that they were going to start using people's data to do AI-driven pricing as opposed to dynamic pricing, which is based on when you purchase the ticket or inventory, supply and demand. Personalized pricing based on your details, in particular what they know about you, and they were going to bring that to about 20% of their airfares by the end of 2025. And there was an immediate outcry by mostly Democratic lawmakers, not exclusively, expressing concern about this was going to lead to higher prices and harm consumers. And Delta, as far as I know, hasn't really addressed that. Well, no, they haven't really addressed that. They've talked to investors about the benefits to them and to investors about personalized pricing, but they haven't really addressed lawmakers' concerns. And so it's just, I mean, as you said in the green room, Neil, companies have been looking, retailers and others have been looking for a way to do personalized pricing for a very, very long time. And, now the technological capability exists, but there are certainly privacy concerns, and there are also concerns about exploiting consumers or charging people based on improper kinds of details or information. So,
this was a big deal in the sports ticketing business, that they were going to move to dynamic pricing for games. And there was kind of an uproar, like, what's that going to mean? And in reality, it's a pretty good model because, games that have lesser interest are less expensive to attend, and games that have high interest are priced accordingly. I don't know where the next step beyond the dynamic, which is sort of dependent on supply and demand, is personalized. I think that's what they're trying to get at here. And maybe there are ways that it knows that I'm a lightweight user of their experience, that I don't demand a lot, that I don't check bags, or I don't weigh too much. I mean, it can get into all sorts of things, right? I mean, right now, if you're 300 pounds or 100 pounds, you pay the same fare. But maybe that's where they're going with this. I don't really know. I think it's there are all these things that we think about in the future of pricing for healthcare. I'm 300 pounds, not in good health. I'm 150 pounds in great health. Should pricing be different for that too down the road? Personalized pricing. I mean, there's a whole range of dimensions that this could go. And some of it would be super beneficial, and some of it might be pretty egregious, huh?
I challenge you to name the beneficial things.
Well, if I'm in good shape and I don't, I mean, why shouldn't I benefit from that?
Well, wait, in what context? You're talking about healthcare?
Maybe I weigh below the average weight for a 5'11" male, and therefore they're not going to charge me as much on Delta as if I'm, 100 pounds overweight. I mean, there's a benefit to me. I mean, I'm not saying I am underweight, but But, I mean,
In the insurance industry, different pricing is used to create incentives.
smoker, non-smoker. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
To create incentives for people to behave in ways that are healthier and ultimately
Right.
reduce costs. So if you are within some weight range, or you're not drinking tons of alcohol, or you're not a smoker, you're not reckless in other ways, that there's a rational argument to be made in support of that, because it's creating incentives for people to be healthier, presumably, which will improve their lives and reduce their costs. I think this is not that. I think this is not that. But Andy, what do you think? Do you like it?
Well, it feels like surveillance pricing to me, right? And it also, this is not anything new as well. I mean, when you access any airlines, they're looking at your IP address, they're looking at your browser, your device that you're on, they're looking at your cookies and browser history to determine urgency signals and repeat visitors and those kinds of things. And they're going to give you dynamic pricing based on those signals as it is today. They're just not disclosing it. They just happen to be disclosing it here, which, they're kind of, might be a PR snafu more than anything, because they probably could have just done it without disclosing it. Not to say that that's a good practice or anything, but
You think it's already happening?
well, it is happening to some extent already. I mean, you and I could be accessing the same website and booking the same trip, but we could get different pricing today, right?
Think about when you get to the hotel space, and Marriott, Bonvoy, where I book a lot of my hotels, they may be doing the same thing, frankly, because they know how many times I complain, and if I'm a complaining kind of guest, or I'm a good guest and I leave the room trash. I mean, there are all sorts of things. Restaurants must know that. How well do you tip? Do you show up on time? We create tons of data about ourselves out there in the world that people could trust on.
Yeah. So there's a whole discussion about what kind of data should be protected from that access, which we don't need to get into here. There are certain categories of data, certain behaviors that companies should absolutely not have access to. And the only way to do that is regulation or legislation, because they will take every piece of data that's available and use it to their advantage. And unfortunately, we're not going to see any of that. We're not going to see any new consumer protections in the foreseeable future. The reason that Delta introduced this is because they wanted to present themselves to investors as a leader.
As leading edge.
Right.
Yeah.
They're a leader, and they think that it's going to increase revenue. That's why they're talking about it. It turns out that it is, as you said, Andy, a big PR screw up, because they're going to get a lot more negative attention than positive attention. But what I was going to say is that there's an example in one of the articles that says, in 2024, Target, the retailer, charged people $100 more for a TV when they were in the Target parking lot versus another location. Now, I don't know exactly what that means. It was probably e-commerce context, but so they're in the Target parking lot. They're seeing a price based on location information that is more expensive than somewhere else. And then there was another example given about Orbitz, the booking platform, which I didn't even know still existed. Maybe this is in the past. Found that Mac users were willing to spend more money to stay at hotels, and it charged them more accordingly. So
Right.
these examples are of companies trying to get more revenue by charging more based on information about individuals or groups of individuals. So there are no examples of people reducing costs for the healthier person who weighs less and is going to weigh down the plane less.
Except insurance companies.
Insurance
Yeah.
is I mean, I have almost nothing
And it's
positive.
only life insurance.
What?
It's not health. It's only life insurance, I think. Maybe it is on regular health insurance. I don't know.
The only area that I could see this having a benefit is if you're a member and they want to create other incentives for you to become, more deeply ingrained in their membership. So, For example, if Delta and Amex have a partnership and they want to be able to create more loyalty to both of those brands together, using AI to be able to do some sort of matching, profiling, and then create, a personalized incentive so that the three of us get different incentives based on how we participate with those brands. I could see some sort of benefit that might happen there. Points incentives if you're traveling, within a certain time period, so that they sell out more flow.
Or if they know that I'm a United customer, a loyal United customer, they want to offer me a loyal fare to get me to try Delta. That's another scenario.
Exactly. So I can see, that type of thing. But for the scenarios that we're talking about, it feels like surveillance pricing and more predatory, kind of a thing. I think we're just going to have to find out, a little bit more about, it's one of these use cases where a company comes out and they say, hey, we're going to use AI to create custom pricing. But, all that does is it just like enters in a lot of buzzwords that create concern. We're going to use blank. We're going to create concern to create more concern is what it sounds like.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens and whether or not they are beaten back by the lawmakers who are raising alarms, or whether they're more transparent about what they give us concrete
Yes.
examples where there are benefits.
Let's take this one more step to the local for a second. Let's imagine that, a franchisor like Neighborly, which is they have a bunch of home services brands like a Garage Door Fix It, they got a ton of brands in there. And they know that Neil is a terrible complainer, is slow to pay, but he's a lead and he's probably going to buy something because he's shown a history of buying stuff. He's just a bit of a pain in the butt to deal with. I mean, I could see estimating models where I'm thrown into that and, I'm charged 15 or 25% more because of my behavior. I mean, I think when we sort of unwrap this thing, it could go in a lot of dimensions that are, really are about our behaviors as consumers, foreshadowing how we're going to be treated by companies. And for a long time, consumers have had the upper hand in that. And maybe this is where companies get back some of the power in that equation.
Yeah,
like consumer karma kind of a thing.
Well, we should move on. There's a lot more to say about this. I 100% don't agree with you, Neil. 110%. I think this is only bad for consumers, and I think it's more.
I didn't say it was good. I just said I could see it applying across many dimensions.
I mean, the history of consumer pricing is one of discrimination and abuses, absent regulatory intervention. And now we may be at technology and sort of lax regulation, or sort of a more laissez-faire attitude in government, may be moving us back to a time when there's less transparency, there's less fairness, and companies exploit the imbalances in power to increase revenue, and the government doesn't do anything about it. I think we're in that.
Well, we're in a time of deregulation as well, and then also you couple that with the acceleration of AI.
Yep.
That people will exploit these kinds of things. I was actually surprised that Delta disclosed this, to be honest.
And yet there's more transparency into pricing today than ever on our behalf. I mean, so
maybe not. Well, maybe not.
All right, let's go on to the next topic here. Therapy sessions with AI.
All right. So I wanted to bring this up. In the past week, and Greg, that Harvard study pointed to therapy and companionship, I think it was. I don't remember. Number one use case based on some unscientific methodology, but it was the number one kind of use case among some Harvard Business Review piece of research. So this past week, on two occasions, I had conversations with people who typed into some ChatGPT. I think it was ChatGPT in both cases. Stuff they were struggling with in their personal lives. And the responses came back were both, in both cases, and they both brought it to my attention, were what they felt were incredibly valuable responses. Super empathetic, very instructive, lots of pointers about how to sort of manage through these personal situations. And they, in both cases, said, the good news about this is, and they pointed to me and they pointed to a friend of mine and said, you guys, us being their husbands, are not as valuable anymore because because these tools were so helpful in these two situations. And I mean, that's pretty interesting. And so then I had this conversation with somebody who works inside of AWS, and he said these tools and these models are trained to be somewhat more empathetic than objective. So I'll put that out there for you guys to chew
So,
on.
quick question: are these purely personal challenges, or are they in a work context?
No, personal,
Okay.
personal life, not work life.
Well, so there are a ton of people, in younger people who are pursuing AI companions, either whether it's ChatGPT or some, replicant or some specialized avatar creation scenario. This is widespread behavior, and there have been a lot of discussions of is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? A lot of people like it. It's cheap. It's accessible. In some cases, it's very useful. In other cases, maybe difficult, dangerous. There was the kid who committed suicide based on an interaction with a replicant AI, I believe. But it is a way to democratize therapy and make it very accessible at low cost. I mean, when you're talking about people who need help and they're confronted with $200, $250, $300 an hour fees, that's pretty
For
prohibitive.
months on end.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good scenarios. There's a lot of things to be concerned about. There was an example where I read a woman had, I don't know who the company was. There was an AI company behind this. I don't think it was a foundation model, where she was interacting with an AI and talking to it about her problems. And she ultimately divorced her husband because the AI was more empathetic and useful to her than her
That's what
husband.
I'm worried about here.
Well, I think there's a very real concern there for you, Neil.
But I think the point is that that's I don't know how big the therapy industry is. It's got to be multiple billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars. But like a prompt and a response was like probably 10 sessions at $200 an hour. That's $2,000 versus zero. I mean, that's real, as you said, Greg, real democratization of stuff that mainly rich people can afford. And that's a good thing in general. And what we don't hear are all the success stories of this. We hear the negative stories where somebody commits suicide or whatever, but we don't hear all the good stuff generally. We just hear the outliers.
Also, I always think about this since you mentioned it, but I love this idea of, for people who are elderly and experience a lot of loneliness. I feel like, that is such a great use case for companionship and somebody to talk to. And as robotics come into the market, I really, and people have a hard time lifting things and putting things on shelves and assisted living in general. I see that being such a huge use case for this kind of direction.
Yesterday, I was visiting a cousin who's sadly now in a dementia memory care place. And to your point, Andy, I could see that being incredibly useful even in that environment, because it might not take, I mean, I was trying to have a conversation with this cousin of mine, and it was gibberish on the other side, sadly. But you can imagine, but she was so excited to be having a conversation, So, I mean, I think there's some really powerful, use cases down the road of this in that environment that would be really beneficial to our society, as opposed to sitting there and watching Phenomenon, the movie from 20 years ago with
Or
John.
doom scrolling, I mean, like, that too. So
I don't think they can even do that, Andy.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't.
I think that there are a lot of very concrete benefits here for people in the elderly care situation, therapy situation. The thing is, and I'm totally supportive of all that. They just have to be, the safety issues just have to be addressed, and
Yes.
and we just have to be careful that these things are programmed in such a way, or specialized bots are set up in such a way to maximize positive outcomes, and not sort of kind of turn into the girlfriend who encouraged her boyfriend to commit suicide kind of thing.
Do you think it's problematic that they're tuned to be more empathetic, or sort of lean empathetic?
Not in a therapy context, for sure.
Because a therapist is going to lean that way, right?
Well,
most.
I mean, this gets into a philosophical conversation about the role of therapists and whether they should just be sort of supportive, or which should challenge you in any way. I think the empathy is great. It depends on the particular scenario, but on balance, it's better to be empathetic than not. And I think it's largely a positive development.
Agreed. And I do agree that the safety guardrails need to be in place. Well, let's move on to our next topic here. So Google stole the show this week with their earnings announcement. I'm just going to share some key highlights at a glance. Total revenue rose 14% year over year to $96.4 billion for the quarter. Net income climbed 19% to $28 billion for the quarter. Google Cloud stole the show. Google Cloud revenue jumped 32% to $13.6 billion. So a huge chunk of their revenue now is Google Cloud. Google Cloud's annualized revenue run rate has now topped $50 billion. So clearly on fire. AI supercharged search and services. So Google search and services, including YouTube and subscriptions, grew 12%, contributing $82.5 billion in revenue for the quarter. And AI-led features like AI overviews are now serving 2 billion monthly users. AI mode hit 100 million monthly users in the US and India alone. Gemini reached 450 million active users. So, and they're doubling, tripling down on their investment and their capital strategy. These numbers are pretty eye-popping. And, you hear people say, well, ChatGPT is going to crush Google. Google's done because, people just use AI for search and these kinds of things. But clearly that's not the case. Greg, I know you're heavily steeped in Google data and user experience. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I mean, I think that, according to Google, all their AI stuff is beloved by users and doing wonders for their organization across the board. And that would seem to be borne out by the revenue results. I mean, ironically, it's ChatGPT that got them to do all this stuff. In the absence of ChatGPT, it would be a very different story. Now, they might still be growing revenue hand over fist because of their search monopoly and all of that. But I think to the extent that these AI innovations are benefiting them, then they have ChatGPT to thank partly. I mean, I think the story behind the curtain is a little more complicated around search, but that's a conversation for another time, perhaps. One of the things that's really true is that their advertising revenue is going strong because organic visibility, organic click-throughs is getting harder and harder. This happened on Facebook a long time ago, and it's been happening to Google, but they're aggressively monetizing everything, and it's just getting more challenging as an organic search marketer to get the same traffic that you used to get. So that's benefiting them as well.
That's a really interesting insight right there. Their business really is booming on the ad side, and I could see how budgets are just doubling down on Google Ads, and also there's data that shows that when you combine any organic search and organic presence with paid traffic like that there's a compounding effect as well. So even if you might be showing up in the search results, but you're not getting organic clicks, and you couple that with a paid ad campaign, that can create a compounding effect in the overall conversion rate.
Right. And just a real kind of quick additional thing to mention, they also sort of simultaneously, I mean, the earnings were earlier this week, and later this week, they introduced this new thing called WebGuide, which is another AI-driven search interface that takes topics and groups them on the page in different ways based on a kind of a query fan out technique, where they're taking your search query and they're elaborating it and then bringing back all the information and then organizing it. And it's a pretty interesting new development that's different from AI mode, different from AI overviews and the current search results, and is something that may ultimately be the future of search for them. People have been talking about AI mode. This is going to be the future. And Google has said, no, it's not. It's really just a way for us to test things and bring them over to search. So that'll be very interesting to watch, because I think it'll mollify some of their critics in a way that the current AI offerings have not done. Because, for example, links are prominent. It looks like the old search results to a high degree, and it will drive click-throughs in a way that AI mode does not, or AI overviews do not.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to our next topic here. AI advisor Alexander Braun argues that companies winning in today's AI landscape aren't necessarily building the best products. They're just claiming territory first. And so he drops a few names, like the company Lovable. Harvey also was another one. And of course, OpenAI.
Harvey's the legal platform, isn't it, Greg?
Harvey's the legal platform. Yeah. So interesting. A couple of data points here. So Lovable hit a $1.8 billion valuation in 8 months, despite what's being called a cloud wrapper. Also, one of the fastest companies to hit $100 million in revenue. So, got to hand it to them for hitting that number. Harvey is a legal AI platform. Jumped from a $3.5 billion valuation to $5 billion valuation in just 4 months. But essentially could be called ChatGPT in legal clothing. And then OpenAI dominates over 80% of all AI agent traffic so far is via OpenAI. So not necessarily because it's better, but because it got there first. So the idea is that bold claims and aggressive marketing matters more than
first to market.
So, let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, I find it really interesting. Like Lovable. So I spent some time with Lovable this week. Fantastic app, really cool that you can feed it an idea. The thing that is not, a cloud wrapper for me anyway, when I used it, was that it's able to crank out a UI by just giving it some input. And you can have a functioning app very quickly. I've tried doing the same thing on Claude. It might give you some JSON. It might give you some code. It might give you a not so great looking, maybe it's more of a wireframe than it is a web app. But Lovable has done a really good job, in my opinion, of creating this really beautiful front end that you can create from an idea. I was very impressed by that.
Interesting you bring up Lovable. I ran into a guy I know last Friday in town, and he couldn't say enough about the experience he's having with Lovable and how great it's going and how much he can do with it. Greg, this is my friend Alex, his office we've used in Sausalito. He's playing around with Lovable, and he said it's unbelievable. It's knocking his socks off.
It really did for me too. I spent 4 or 5 hours with it last weekend, and I was very impressed with how quickly it can create a full user experience. You have an idea, it'll create a draft of it. You're like, make the button say this, make a page that has settings, for example, on it, make it so you can enter API keys and all that. And it does it. And it's not just, Figma, kind of screens, it's actual functionality. And then you can hook a database up to it and integrate that. Now you've got a full functioning app, and within hours that normally would have taken 2 to 6 weeks to create.
Well, and thousands of dollars from developers, right?
Yeah, this is what my friend Alex said to me. He was like, a gasp.
I was too. I was really impressed by that. And I've tried these kinds of things with Claude and with OpenAI, with ChatGPT and other tools. I just haven't gotten that experience. I tried Bolt also. Bolt was another similar. It's a competitor to Lovable. And my experience wasn't nearly as good, I have to say. It's very interesting.
To me, the most interesting thing about this is, I have not used Lovable. Is this whole value creation layer discussion? Who's creating where is the value created? And there's a kind of specialization on top of the foundation models with a lot of tuning and a lot of refinement that enables the experience that you're describing. And that's interesting. It's not quite a go-to-market, but sort of. It's like Neil and I often will discuss, like, do horizontal AI first apps or vertically oriented AI first apps have a better chance of sort of winning against some of the legacy incumbents? And, so value creation, kind of go-to-market strategy, and specialization for a task or an industry these are the things that are kind of interesting about this discussion to me.
I agree. And I think the valuations on these companies is just sky high. I mean, if you're, a year-old company and you're already $1 billion plus valuation, built on another LLM. I mean, on the one hand, it's sort of like good for you for doing that. But on the other, that just means that you're going to have to get much higher valuation down the road. And at some point, I feel like there's going to be valuation cratering, because I don't know if there are going to be that many buyers for these kinds of.
Well, if you're too expensive too quickly, no.
I mean, people look at it and go, "Wow, that's incredible! I want to be that," and people become these paper, billionaires and that kind of a thing. But that implies that there's going to be an exit at
trillions.
A 10x multiple of that. And is that really realistic? I don't know. I mean, we'll see, obviously, but I just feel like the valuations have just gone into the billions, and people forget that billions are, it's not just like a difference between 1 million and 1 billion. And it's just like,
there's a lot more zeros.
A lot of zeros.
and you need even more zeros to justify the exit, or to get the exit that people are looking for.
Are you going to get an exit for $30 billion, $50 billion? I mean,
well, and it's all happening during a market that seems to have no
relationship to reality.
But who are the buyers? I mean, NVIDIA's not going to be the buyer. Google's not going to be the buyer. Microsoft's not going to be the buyer. So who are those buyers that could afford that kind of an exit? Then you're forced to go public, and is the public market going to respond to that in that same way?
There's still trillions of dollars not invested in the market. That's why the market keeps going up. I
get that. I do get that. But I wonder, let's just imagine any one of these companies, Harvey or Lovable, let's imagine that, they just keep climbing at these valuations. And by the time they go public, they're already valued at a $50 billion valuation, right? And the early investors today get their exit on the IPO. And then what? You think that the public market is going to support that kind of a valuation for the kind of revenue they're driving? I just don't see it.
Well, but the public is supporting some valuations right now that are pretty high off the charts.
And I don't see private equity paying these kinds of valuations either. So I like, in a way, it's eye popping and it's noteworthy, and there's a lot of self congratulation that's going on in those companies, I think. But I also think when reality strikes, it's going to be a little bit like musical chairs, where people are like, we don't have a buyer, we don't have an exit, we can't go public. Now what?
Or a pyramid scheme,
I mean, there's value. It's not so much like pyramid scheme in that.
Well,
the
early investors, the early people in make the money, and the people who are late don't. Basically, that's what I meant.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, I mean, and there will be probably secondary markets for these kinds of things. So, like, look at Stripe, for example. They've not gone public, and they've created tons of value, and their valuation is very high. But they also do have a secondary market. So if their employees want to sell stock, they can sell stock and get an exit on it. So maybe that's where the market evolves, actually, where it's not a public market and it's not an acquisition, it's something in between. And maybe that's where this whole market evolves to.
Yep. I think you're right.
So interesting.
On that prophetic note.
There you go. We'll see what happens. But great conversation, guys. We'll be back next week with more news about what's going on in the world of AI. Thanks everybody for listening.
See you later.